Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 24th of June, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Garish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And we will be joined by live Skype link by David Scott from Northern Exposure. Well, of course, it's Friday, and that means the result is out. And of course, the result was a very clear Leave vote. Consequently, the sun is shining in Plymouth, and the weather across the rest of the country is pretty good as well. Perth apparently is fluffy clouds, blue sky, sunshine, a little light rain in Manchester, but that's fairly normal. And we understand that there are tropical storms in Holland, and that is the actual climate. It's not the political climate at the moment. So tragic news, Mike, that Will Straw is missing.
It is tragic.
Of course, this was the man who came out of nowhere, little job, which I would presume his daddy set up for him, Britain Stronger in Europe. But apparently he's not to be seen at the moment, so I don't know where he is. I think I remember a game where you had to find Where's Wally or something like that. You had to look for a little figure amongst a whole mass of other people. So there we are. Condolences to Will Straw. Presumably he's crawled off to a hole somewhere. But we'll also bring this up on screen because this is quite extraordinary stuff, or not. The Daily Mail reporting that following a leaked email, we are able to see that the BBC utterly despises the general public. And if you dared to have believed that the leave the European Union as fast as possible was the correct way to go, you were just a ghastly person.
Yes.
So if you want to read one article which illustrates what the BBC is really about, that Mail article is it, really. No, I'll end it there because otherwise I'm going to say something and we're going to spoil the no swearing rule on UK Column. But what we would like to say to people is, whilst of course the result has brought a lot of happiness and joy to many individuals, we think it's the start of the real battle, and it's absolutely vital that people realise that this government is not simply going to roll over and allow Britain to take back its sovereignty as a nation state. We are very confident that what follows from here on is going to be a very dark picture as the government delays, stalls and obfuscates in order to make sure this decision can be reversed. More on that in a minute. But we'd like to just take you through some of the key players in this extraordinary game of treason chess, which is being carried out by the British government. So let's see whether this works. I think this is going to leave the BBC's infographics in the dust. So we've got the dark arts side, of course. And really good people are there playing the white pieces at the bottom of the board. So how does this map out? Well, let's see who we've got. The Queen, of course, utterly betrayed her country by accepting mediatisation, giving her power away to a foreign state, the European Union. And we better bring in alongside her, of course, one of the major players in the money side of life. You're going to be mentioning him a little bit later, Mike, but George Soros, of course, controlling billions, blackmailing the country. And what better person to have on your side than Archbishop Welby, the man who has simply refused to deal with Satanism or child abuse in the country. He prefers to hobnob next to the bankers. And in the wings, but clearly a player in British politics, we've got key individuals like Jean-Claude Juncker. So the EU is effectively in the British establishment and the political scene. Let's not forget people like Nick Clegg, because this man is still in the background, very, very subversive Europhile, and he worked flat out with David Cameron to try and engineer UK locked into the EU. Well, the real powerhouse, Oliver Letwin, the paper's not mentioning this man, but this is the man controlling the cabinet, controlling the Tory party, and also controlling, of course, the behavioural insights team who've been leading the propaganda campaign. Boris Johnson, Prime Minister in waiting, do you think, Mike?
Absolutely.
Let's bring him onto the field. And of course, this lady who is silent at the moment, but Theresa May, Home Secretary, nothing said on the subject of Jo Cox. But of course, this woman has orchestrated the police state inside UK. Very, very dangerous individual. Propaganda, well, there is only one organisation for that, the BBC. And of course, what do we need to do with the help of the BBC? Cover up the abuse of children by the establishment. So we've put Ms. Goddard there, a little bit frightening, but we'll bring her in on the black side. And dark actors. So Francis Maud, UK column, unique in pointing out this incestuous relationship with the political charity Common Purpose. And we better bring in senior military. Well, as far as I'm concerned, these people, by supporting the EU, have betrayed the country. So we just bring Lord Bramwell in as one example of the pro-EU brigade. He's a little bit crooked there on the screen, but not to worry. And you can't do this without the blessing of the intelligence services. So whether it's GCHQ or MI6 meeting at Bilderberg, you've got to have the security services on board. And, well, Mike, what would you like to say about Mr. Corbyn? Is he in or out?
We'll be talking about that in a moment.
Okay, we'll just pop him on the board there. And there she is, Nippy Sturgeon, dark arts actor. And I've put tasked to break up the union because I'm sure that that's her job. And that's why she's normally dressed in red. Well, if you're going to do the job, you need to have the police on side. So I've just chosen Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe as an example of senior police officers clearly there to protect the establishment. How do we know something nasty is happening? Well, let's think of who we can see. So we've got soldiers such as Alexander Blackman do the job. They end up in prison. We've got children in Syria, suffering as a result of bombing by this black elite. We've got people who stand up to be counted. This was the Muslim gentleman from Oxford, tried to blow the whistle on child abuse. He was stamped on by the British state. And of course, Melanie Shaw, child abuse survivor, we now know is back in prison. More on that in due course. So we can see the casualties on the battlefield, but who are they really after? All of us. And we've labelled the rest of our society there. Be under no illusion this treasonous British government wants to utterly destroy the nation state and the family. And they're also playing from the wings. So let's remember that Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Brooks Newmark, Cameron, is he on the board or off? It's a bit close, Mike. And also, where does the powerhouse come from? Well, Bank of International Settlements there. So these people are not going to roll over simply because there's been a leave vote. David.
Very interesting analysis there, Brian. Just one thing. Nick Clegg. Nick Clegg's not a knight. That would have to be a pawn.
Well, I think that was an old nag I had on that space, actually, but I take your point.
Well, I have to say, David, you watched all night, but some of the reaction from some of the politicians was spectacularly good. Keith Vaz particularly stood out for me. In 1,000 years, I would never have believed the British people would have voted in this way, and they've done so. I think emotionally, rather than looking at the facts, it will be catastrophic. And he was clearly disturbed.
Clearly disturbed. This was in about 15 minutes of the BBC actually announcing formally, although it had been obvious for hours before this, announcing formally that the Leave side had won. And Vaz came on and he looked like someone had stolen his ice cream. He looked like a small man, an intellectual pygmy in a world he no longer understood. And he stood there, almost with tears in his eyes, and he told the British people, "You've got it wrong. You should have listened to me. You got it wrong." And, well, there you go. It was a wonderful moment.
Yes, and another wonderful moment, of course, was the moment that, as predicted, David Cameron came out and resigned. I do not think it would be right for me to be the captain who steers our country to its next destination, he said. He said, "I do believe it is in the national interest to have a period of stability and then the new leadership required. In my view, we should aim to have a new Prime Minister in place by the start of the Conservative Party conference in October." So exactly as we thought. But I thought it was interesting that he is claiming to be interested in having a period of stability. I think we can assume there that the meaning of that is 180 degrees different. Certainly, if we look what's happening, we'll talk about this in a moment, to the Labour Party today, we're clearly heading into a period of instability. Part of the instability, of course, is coming from the question of, are we actually going to leave or not? And so somebody was emailing out today, I don't understand why it's being reported that the Leave MPs are asking for Article 50 not to be evoked. Well, in fact, David Cameron also gave a clue as to what's going on here as well, because he says that it should be up to the next Prime Minister to decide when to activate Article 50. So the delaying tactics, we're not even out the gates yet, and it's already being delayed.
Stall delay.
Absolutely. On the other hand, Corbyn, who of course has been campaigning to stay in, is now saying that Article 50 has to be invoked now. They're making it up as they go along, I think, in some respects, but perhaps this is a little bit of a sort of protest by Corbyn, because he's been pushed into supporting the Remain campaign, even though he's been a long time EU, long time against the EU, but he's sort of been pushed by party politics, internal party politics, to stick with the Remain campaign. And it looks like he's showing his true colours here. But David, you were saying that there's already a call for a vote of no confidence in Corbyn.
Yes, that's already come from people within the Parliamentary Labour Party. So he's likely to go as well. So we'll have, it would seem likely, a new leader of the opposition as well. Corbyn's performance in this has been very strange. He's a leader who can't really say what he believes in most cases because it's so extreme. But he seems to rebel every now and again when he believes something he knows to be true, and he tells the truth. And he's told the truth about Article 50, and he told the truth about immigration. And so that's why he's going to be out of a job.
Well, quite possibly, but I think the main problem is that he's not prepared to stand up for what he believes in against particularly the Blairite faction of the party, and he's busy trying to herd the cats, as it were, to try to keep this party going in a direction. I'm not quite sure that it's his direction, but he's trying to keep it going in a direction. And I mean, do you agree with me that that's perhaps the wrong leadership approach in this case?
Yes, I mean the Labour Party have got huge and absolutely fundamental problems, which have arisen from the fact that what they believe in and what their political elite have been putting forward for decades is actually quite the opposite of what the grassroots working class support that they draw their vote from actually believes in. And this lying and deceit is finally catching them out. And Mr. Corbyn has been unable to turn that situation around because, as you say, ultimately he didn't have the strength of character to do it. Although, had he done that, he would probably have had two parties by now.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's move on to what's going to happen next. And clearly, the first thing that's going to happen is that we're going to break up the union. This, of course, has been part of the constitutional reform agenda for quite some time. But this is Manfred Weber here in the image, who is the leader of the Conservative group in the EU Parliament. He's a very close colleague of Angela Merkel. And he's saying there are upcoming decisions, particularly for Scotland and Northern Ireland. It's up to them, but it's totally clear that those who want to stay are welcomed in the European Union. So the rhetoric that there was before in the early days of the referendum, or certainly for the Scottish independence referendum, that if they were to vote for independence, that there would be no guaranteed membership of the European Union, that has suddenly changed. Now you're going to be welcome in the European Union, and in fact, the propaganda in the media about this as well. So here's Northern Ireland votes to remain, and a lot of the rhetoric in the media it was almost a done deal. Now, of course, Scotland was all yellow, but even there was a significant proportion of the population that were voting to leave. So here we've got half the country, population-wise, in Northern Ireland, more or less voting to leave. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, the exploitation of the situation by the European spokesman there was quite remarkable, because obviously the political situation was that Europe would not support an independent Scotland, because then you would have an independent Catalonia, you would have an independent Basque country, and all of the powerful players in Europe would be shorn of sections of their tax base, which is what it comes down to, remember. So Scotland was getting no support, and now it's changed. But you have to remember the equation that is facing the SNP now is actually quite horrific, because what is their policy? Their policy is independence within Europe. Okay, now that's oxymoronic, but that's their policy. So they have overcome, for example, the question of, do we really want border controls at Gretna? By saying, well, we're all in the EU together, there won't be border controls at Gretna, but obviously now that's a potential issue. The idea that the people in Scotland are going to be feel more affection towards the EU than they do towards Great Britain is ludicrous. It's not going to be sustainable. But we're going to hear a lot about it in the next week and month ahead.
Yes, and it looks like also splits in political parties in Scotland as well. So the chaos sort of propagates right across the country.
Yes, I don't think Ruth Davidson's going to be on Boris Johnson's Christmas card list for this. Yes, if Boris gets the leadership, apparently the Scottish Conservatives are going to split away from the Conservative Party UK-wide. Now, this has been suggested for a very long time as Scottish politics diverged to a significant degree from politics in England. There's been voices in the Conservative Party in Scotland for a long time saying we should be an independent party, we should take our own views and our own policy direction, and sever the link to London. So that's quite likely to occur now.
And no agreement on whether to hold another independence vote. So Herald saying Brexit's against Scots' wishes would not lead to backing for independence. We've got Chris Grayling rejecting Alex Salmond's calls for a referendum following a Brexit vote. But we have the SNP, as you say, seeing its future as part of the EU, and an attempt by Sinn Féin to cause the same kind of rhetoric in Ireland. So the outcome of this is to put people absolutely against each other.
There's going to be a huge amount of instability. There's going to be an attempt. The SNP have got one shot left at this, right? But they've now lost 2 referendums. If they lose a third one, it's over. They can't really come back to the constitutional question. The Herald poll showed that the majority of Scots, a greater majority of Scots, would vote to keep the UK together now than voted that way in 2014. So that's one of the major hurdles that the SNP are going to have to overcome if they're going to succeed in breaking up the UK. And another one is to get some sort of engagement in the Westminster Parliament to legitimise this. And a third one is they're going to have to persuade a no campaign in Scotland or a stay together campaign in Scotland to actually campaign, because we've just had a referendum. It was only 2014. So they have to persuade people to actually take both sides of the argument. Otherwise, they just look silly.
David, I wonder if I can ask. I haven't easily seen exactly what the percentage of people in Scotland who voted to leave was. I can see on screen somebody said 38%, but I don't know whether that is the
right.
case.
That was the overall vote in Scotland was 62 Remain, 38 Leave. Right. In some parts, Dumfries and Galloway, it was almost 50-50. Dundee, which is a national supporting city, it was 60-40. Edinburgh was the area. Edinburgh and Glasgow were areas where the Remain vote was strongest. Edinburgh being also a university town, as is Glasgow, voted in a similar way to places like Cambridge and Oxford.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'd just say as a general comment, and we're doing it ourselves at the moment, but it can be no wonder that Britain is not moving forward as a nation when you look at the fact that ever since we've been involved with the European Union, we have problems, division, uncertainty. And now, of course, Cameron is telling us really quite clearly that we're going into a massive period of uncertainty. Ever since we've been near this horrific institution, the European Union, we are stuck in the mud. We don't get on with our lives. We don't create industry. We're not looking after the people that need our help in society. We're not looking after our children. There's just this constant turmoil over the European Union. And I thought it was remarkable that that lady, Charmian Evans, I think her name was, that wrote the article in the Plymouth Herald yesterday, really pointed out that when she went to Europe, what did she see but fat cats in huge offices doing nothing and then spending vast amounts of money in all the restaurants. I'm giving a lot of personal opinion here, but it seems to me if you just look at the situation in the simple terms, the EU is a ball and chain around the ankles of the nation, whether we're talking north or south of the border. Have I got it wrong or what?
No, I think you've got it right, and I'm just going to bring this on screen because the propaganda over this. I wanted to highlight this one. We didn't show it yesterday. Patrick Henningsen showed it to us, pointed it out to us. The propaganda in this is staggering, isn't it? And of course, the implication is that if we leave the European Union, that the uncertainty arrives from. But the uncertainty, as you say, has been there since we joined.
Yeah. And these people are telling us that we cannot run a nation. Who is the Daily Mirror? I mean, who is it?
Well, indeed. So the mainstream propaganda has been probably the most significant feature of this entire process. As even within newspaper groups, we've seen opposite positions being taken in order to try to manipulate people's minds.
This isn't good propaganda, though. This is very poor propaganda. This is cliche as political rhetoric. There is no argument there. Leap into the dark. What does that mean? There's no case. There's no logic. There's no reason. It's simply looking for a knee-jerk reaction, and it's an absence of anything positive to say. And that came out of the campaign as well. That what were the people who were advocating remaining in the EU saying? Well, it's a scary world out there. It'll be Armageddon. The sun will no longer shine, and everything you buy will blow up and kill you. That was essentially their viewpoint. It was nonsense. It was clearly nonsense. They had no positive case because you can't look at the EU institutions and make a positive case. We had, albeit we have a very imperfect government and we have very imperfect institutions in this country, but there was a plan by our political elite to go and carpet bomb Syria just the same way we had done to Libya. And there was a public outcry and there was a vote. And actually, history was changed and we didn't do that. Now, they'll keep coming back and trying to further that agenda again, but it did make a difference. I don't remember any time since 1975 where the European Parliament has ever made a difference.
Absolutely. But let's focus a little bit more on the propaganda because, of course, George Soros was one of the propagandists. He was basically making threats to the nation if we were to leave. And quarter of a century later, Soros warns of another fall in the pound. That was according to the New York Times later on yesterday. And, this was the Telegraph today. UK now poorer than France as pound hits 30-year low and FTSE 100 drops 5% following British vote to leave the EU. This is the most disgraceful headline I think I've ever seen, as we're about to describe. But of course, 5% fall in the FTSE. This came in spite of Mark Carnage's claim that he would support everything. Well, perhaps he is. We'll come on to this in a second. But Carnage saying the Treasury and the Bank of England have engaged in extensive contingency planning, and the Chancellor and I have been in close contact, including through the night and this morning. The bank will not hesitate to take additional measures as required as those markets adjust and the UK economy moves forward. So let's look at this massive collapse in the FTSE. Well, it fell 5%, as the Telegraph said, but it stabilized pretty quickly. That perhaps is through some intervention from the Bank of England and the plunge protection team. But the key point that I've been making for quite a long time is that the FTSE is never allowed to fall below 6,000. And here's the long-term FTSE trend. Certainly since 1998 or so, it has never been allowed to fall below 6,000 for very long. Well, then the other aspect was the currencies, David. And so let's look at some currencies. Here's what happened with the sterling dollar currency pair, and it collapsed this morning, but found some support at some point. And then we have, what's this one, euro dollar, exactly the same, it looks. And then we have dollar yen here doing exactly the same thing. And we have the New Zealand dollar and the US dollar doing pretty much the same thing. And oh, look, let's have a look at gold, and it's doing the exact opposite. So this is nothing to do with Soros's threatened attack on the British pound. Britain is not any poorer today than it was yesterday in particular. This is merely capital flight out of currencies and into gold, David.
Yes, it's a flight to perceived safety, a flight to quality in the case of gold, and a flight to perceived quality in the case of the US dollar. And it's a reaction to the unexpected. It's short term. It really shouldn't concern us greatly. The markets will do what the markets will do. But when you're making decisions regarding the future of your people, you have to take a longer term view than the next day on the FTSE.
Now, the threat from Soros, of course, was that he was going to repeat his activity from Black Wednesday. The question that I wonder is he actually financially capable of having that effect on the markets in 20 years later or whatever it is? What's your view?
Well, I suspect probably not, and he's more into political causes these days than market manipulation. We've also got the view that. Sorry, I've just lost I've been up all night. I've lost my thread.
Okay, don't worry. we shall move on. Now, so that's one aspect: the propaganda and the and so on from the media. But what else is likely to happen? Well, of course, we're seeing increasingly rise of right-wing groups across Europe. We're probably going to see that in this country as well. We're certainly going to see continuing rise of the police state. And we believe that what we're going to see perhaps is some Gladio-style activity, not only on mainland Europe, but probably in the UK as well, as time moves on. So destabilization, chaos is going to be the order of the day as we delay the exit, and perhaps we might find ourselves in a few months' time, Brian, in a position where people are demanding once again the opportunity to stay in.
Well, that could easily happen because, of course, the whole of the organisation to do that is still in place, and I think this is the thing that we have to work extremely hard to do, which is to give the people who voted leave, and I think that's about 16.9 million people. They need to have the real information about what the problem is. I had a call fairly early this morning from a gentleman up at the London end, and he said, well, the thing is, of course, what has the EU ever really done? Not much. It's been our politicians that have handed everything to the EU on a plate. And I think this is the key thing. People have got to understand that the machinery which is ripping this country apart is within our own parliament, and people have got to understand that and how it's working. And until that is rooted out, we are not going to see this country coming back on an even keel, to use that term. So there's a lot of education that has got to be pushed ahead from now on. This is by no means the end of things, because I think the political agenda is going to be to create absolute mayhem in this country so that people are disorientated and they simply can't move towards the right position. The traitors, and I'm going to use that word again, the traitors are in Westminster. These are very dangerous people. And I wonder what President Putin was thinking to himself as he was having his morning cup of coffee, because, of course, many of the agencies that he's thrown out of Russia, the NGOs, the very dangerous subversive organisations, these are the very organisations that are now causing trouble in the UK.
Yeah.
I think he must be smiling to himself as we see Britain being broken up by a hidden hand, which is facilitated by our own members of Parliament.
What are your thoughts?
I think that's very interesting and important points there. It is a battle of ideas. The ideas that this country was built on, ideas of liberty and the rule of law, and we've seen those cast aside, we've seen those trampled on, and you're quite right, principally by our own political overlords, principally by Westminster and Holyrood. But the EU has been at the heart of a lot of it and has been generating a lot of it and supporting, often directly with financial aid, a lot of these ideas. We have to fight in the realm of ideas. When we started off, we talked about Keith Vaz. I thought he was a man who looked bereft because he realised that he had lost a battle of ideas and that having done so, he no longer mattered. And that was an encouraging moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so these people severely challenged because, of course, their whole world view has been turned upside down. But on this subject of what we need to do, the BBC, for example, needs to be brought to account because the arrogance in that organisation absolutely breathtaking in that article, which I'll just come back to. I mean, they're simply saying that if you dared to disagree with the BBC's socio-political view, a liberal view, of course, highly liberal view, you were a ghastly, awful person. This isn't coming from somebody accusing the BBC of this. It's coming from a man who was working inside the BBC's own policy teams where they were briefing on this. So a vast £3.65 billion propaganda machine spewing this stuff out, an organisation taking taxpayers' money and then turning around and simply laughing at anybody who has got the wisdom to say we needed to leave the EU. And I think the other thing I would say, of course, is that many people have been getting very, very hot under the collar on the subject of immigration. But we can see from the polls that were put out publicly that, of course, the government was relying on many of the people that have come in from the European Union in particular to start skewing the vote in favour of Remain. And that, in my opinion, is what the immigration is about. It's cynically using people to break up the United Kingdom in order to force through this false liberal BBC type vote. So Mr. Vaz, who's living in the world that he believes the BBC and he believes what comes out of David Cameron's mouth, all of a sudden he's had his worldview shattered. And that's why I think he would have looked, I'm not sure how you described him, them small and slightly shriveled, I think, because his worldview being challenged. But what an opportunity we've got with, it's almost like the smoke has cleared on the battlefield. We've got 16.9 million people who've spoken and said, we don't want the European Union. These are the people that we need to get alongside, help, encourage, inform as much as possible. And then the other, whatever it is, I've lost my figures here, 15.7 odd million. These are the people we also need to work on to gently knock some sense into them, I think.
Yes. So are we done for today?
Well, David, if you'd like to add anything from north of the border, you're probably going to slope away for a cup of tea and then bed, I would imagine.
I think that what we were faced here was an offer from David Cameron and co. to collaborate and comply with their own enslavement, and the people of the country said no, and that's a start. There's a huge amount to do. but it's a start. Paddy Ashdown tweeted out when the result was known, God help my country. Well, it's just possible last night, in fact, he did, and let's see if we can build on that and get some more truth revealed and encourage people to take command of their own lives and not allow our wise overlords to misrule us as they have done so badly in the last 25 years.
Absolutely, and perhaps we should also give thanks to all the people over very many years who worked so hard to achieve this result, and certainly to highlight that the European Union is a dangerous organisation. We know that as the UK column or even the British Constitution Group, we're quite new players on the scene. We know that many people going back 30, 40 years have been working and campaigning in order to bring the truth out about the European Union. We need to remember those people. We know, of course, all the good work done by smaller parties, UKIP people in particular, but many other people have been out campaigning politically, so they are still going. And really, it's been a team effort, I think, across several generations that have achieved what's come out of it today. My feeling is that we are at a very critical point. This is not the end of the battle. I think this is about the start.
Exactly.
So we will end on that note. Thank you to everybody that's helped make this possible. I'll just say, because I did mention her, that I can confirm that Melanie Shaw is currently in prison. We'll make some contact details available for people who'd like to write to her. But if we wanted an example of the state of David Cameron's Britain in 2016, those who've been abused as children, how does his government reward them? He locks them up in prison. It's vile, Mike. I sometimes am lost for words, but if you want to know what Britain is about, it is about the cover-up of people in positions of political power and establishment power who are abusing children. And I also believe that if we want to stop what is happening with the European Union, we've got to root out the British politicians who are utterly corrupt. These are the people who are happy to see child abuse victims locked up in prison. That's what we need to deal with, and that's got to be the task probably from Monday onwards. Thanks very much for joining us, and as always, if you're not a subscriber, perhaps you consider subscribing to UK Column or making a donation, because we can only do this with your help. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye.